Well, a very good afternoon. Welcome to quite a chilly and almost snowing Les Sables d'Olonne this Sunday afternoon. It's the first Sunday of 2021 and it's day 56 on the racecourse. Back to work tomorrow for many people around the globe. At the front of the fleet, there's no rest at all. It's a change of rhythm as they start up the Atlantic, and it's going to be a busy week of work, certainly for the two leaders. Charlie Dallin on a Pivia, well, he crossed the Cape Horn early this morning, 4:39 UTC in the morning, in second place in the Vendée Globe. It's Charlie's first crossing of Cape Horn, his first timer in the south, and he passed some 14 hours and 58 minutes behind the leader, Yannick Bestaven, and he passed 6 miles off the rock. So he saw the loom of the light, and he had a little bit more of the full Cape Horn experience. In fact, he called up the lighthouse keeper on the Cape Horn rock and spoke to him briefly. So he's a proper Cape Horner now. Really, you always have to consider that Yannick Bestaven has this 10.25 hour recompense, his redress from helping in the search for Kevin Escoffier. That's always in his pocket, and we have to think about that as the climb up the Atlantic continues. My guest today, well, we have Sebastian Joss, our weather consultant, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the climb up the Atlantic, the options and the approach of the peloton into Cape Horn, what can happen there. And Conrad Humphreys is with us from Plymouth. Conrad did the 2004 race, and he's also become a little bit of a historian with Captain Bligh. He's going to tell us a little bit about Captain Bligh and the HMS Bounty's approach to Cape Horn in the wrong direction back in April 1788. A very different situation to the Mocha race. But first of all, we're going to look at the standings at midday today. And as we see, still Yannick Bestaven in the lead, but Charlie Dallin's come back at him since rounding Cape Horn, or in the rounding of Cape Horn. He's much closer into the rock and further to the west, and so he's gained about 40 miles. He's now 103.5 miles behind. Thomas Riong is in third. He's 445 miles behind the leader, Bestaven, in third place. Then only 5 miles behind Damien Seguin on Group Apicil. He is in fourth and challenging Riong all the time. He's having a great race just now. He is 150 miles ahead of Benjamin Dutreux on Omia Water Family. Dutreux as well having a great race at the moment. He is 50 miles now ahead of Jean Lecam, is in sixth. Lecam is 15 miles ahead of Louis Burton. A little word about Louis Burton in passing. You may have noticed that he breached the exclusion zone momentarily. He went in and out. He came back to his original position. It cost him 25 minutes, but because he comes back through the same position, then he doesn't get a penalty, in fact. Boris Harriman in turn is 3 miles behind Louis, just now in 8th place. Isabelle Josch is 10 miles behind Boris. Remember, they crossed earlier on in the day, crossed jibes. Maxime Sorel is in 10th. He's 23 miles behind Josch. Giancarlo Pedotti 11th. Clarisse Kramer is a bit further back. The gap between Pedotti and Clarisse Kramer is 322 miles, and then a gap of 73 miles to Armel Tripon in 13th. Looking at her internationals very quickly, Pip Hare in 15th. She's doing 16.3 knots. She's not entirely sorted out her pilot problems, but she's doing a good speed relative to the boats round about her. She's still just kind of on parity in terms of speed with Alan Rura, who's our nearest rival just behind her. Further down the table then, looking at Didac Costa doing 10.6 knots. He's expecting the big low coming down to him from New Zealand, but he's going well. Kojiro Shiraishi 14.2 knots on the speed gun in 21st. Miranda Meron in 23rd, steady at 14.1 knots. And Ari Hosela coming across into the Pacific at 12.1 knots on board the Starka Mocha. And Sebastian Destremo is doing 13 knots at the moment. So hopefully Sebastian Destremo seems to have sorted out his steering problems, but hopefully we'll get some news and post that and maybe bring you up to date with that situation in our Zoom at 6:30 French time this evening. Let's look at the weather. As I say, we're talking about the front of the fleet primarily, arriving or leaving Cape Horn in the case of Yannick Bestaven and Charlie Dallin, and the long-term approach for Thomas Riong and the boats just behind. So this is the weather. starting off then, looking at pretty much the entire fleet. Nothing really out of the ordinary for the moment, but you can see the big picture first of all. So looking from the back of the fleet, well, this low pressure system is really going to come in progressively for the back of the fleet for Ari Hosela and Alexia Barrier, but it's quite far back just now. Sébastien Destremaux still up here in the safety of the high in the meantime, but he really needs to make some decisions about what he's going to be doing fairly soon, because he will get some influence from that low pressure coming through. Otherwise, a little low just coming above these two boats there, which is Miranda Merrin, and it will come down for her high pressure system here, giving good conditions for this whole train of boats here. And then approaching Cape Horn, if I just move that a little bit back, get a better view. It's really the influence of this low pressure system just now, and the system just for the main group coming in. Got good downwind conditions in the meantime, and then just looking very briefly at the approach to Cape Horn in a little bit more detail. I say fairly decent conditions, kind of mainly downwind or slightly broad reaching as they come up towards the Horn. But that's the general situation. Let's look in a little bit more detail for the situation at the very front of the fleet. So this is Yannick Bestaven this morning, and Charlie Dallin, who's well, it's just very early because this is just before Cape Horn, but just giving you a general picture of the weather situation. They're coming in quite brisk reaching conditions. Less wind just now out here in the east for Yannick Bestaven, and then very quickly back here, as I say, down along the ice barrier. It's generally fairly downwind conditions, and so it's very much, it's like a fairly typical offshore race just now, coming downwind. It's all about finding the best jibing angles and the fastest angles at the moment for the boats in the peloton. Then looking in a little bit more detail at the situation in the South Atlantic, we're looking really quite far ahead. This is probably a full week ahead. Looking at Charlie Dallin's routing, it's much further to the west. This high pressure system develops, and that makes it very complicated, very difficult to plan a perfect route to the north. You see Charlie trying to pick his way through the light zone. It's upwind to the west here of the high pressure system, and then progressively for Bestaven sailing more miles round to the east, but he is downwind, and he'll use the curve of the high pressure system, and then a little bit more complicated initially for the boats down to the south. But we'll get a little bit more detail about that as things evolve. And then if I just pull up our animation. So this is Bestaven, this is Dallin. This is, again, as ever, it's always a fairly theoretical situation, but watching Bestaven working the ice barrier initially, and then Charlie going up, watching the centre of the high pressure, not going too close to the centre, and staying on this routing, staying on the east side of the centre. And that's as far as that animation runs just now. So that's the situation just now for principally looking at the leaders, and we'll get a little bit more detail about the situation in the South Atlantic with Sébastien Josse. So Seb, yeah, go ahead, Seb. Tell us how the situation is in the South Atlantic then.
South Atlantic, it's quite complicated for the lead, because we see the high pressure moving east. So it's for Maître Coq. He has to turn on the right of this high pressure, but this high pressure moving quite fast, so he can spark in this low wind. So he have to manage the high pressure, but to keep the east part, because in 10 days he looks to catch the trade winds of the Saint Helene. So it's quite hard work today to look which strategy is good to take.
And he always has this 10 and a quarter hours in his pocket, the recompense, the redress for his involvement with the search for Kevin Escoffier. How will that influence his strategy relative to Dallin and the boats behind?
Today, it's quite early to think about this bonus because we see Yannick sail really well. He takes the lead with nothing. He don't think about this 10 hours bonus. So it's little bit early. We can look when the bonus give advantage to Yannick after the doldrums, because now it's so too much complicated. It's a lot of work on the front of on the bow of this boat. So it's one high pressure, one low pressure, and after again one high pressure to catch the trade winds and the doldrums. So the next 14 days, it's a lot of work and strategic for these two boats.
And is this situation very different to what we see in the road books that the sailors plan with for the different stages of the race?
Yeah, normally the wind is little bit more stable, or the situation normally in the road book, it's you have a low pressure or high pressure, and you catch the low pressure and you can go north downwind, and after you make the connection with the high pressure. It's for that you have to be east and you catch the trade winds and you reach to the doldrums, and after you arrive again in the North Atlantic. So for the 2 days, for Yannick, it's complicated to manage that, and maybe he have to make a little bit a match race with Apivia, not go too far from Apivia, because the situation is not stable.
Exactly. Now then, what about the chasing pack, the boats coming into Cape Horn now? Is there still a chance of one of them winning the Vendée Globe, do you think?
For the rest of the fleet, it's maybe complicated to catch these two boats, but the Vendée Globe is not finished and a lot of things can happen. We see all the boat is not in the good shape. In the back, you have a really strong competitors like Damien Seguin and Benjamin, and Oslo, Boris Herman. The boat is not it's in the good shape, so we can see some surprise, but we have to wait the doldrums to know if you have a break in their fleet or not.
Now listen, Seb, you watch this race with fine detail all the way since the start until now. You're a competitor. I give you a €10 million budget. What would you be doing for the next race as a competitor?
What I was doing? I buy a boat straight.
But which boat?
If I can, I'm really curious to sail in L'Occitane.
Really?
I think it's the future of the IMOCA fleet. And after I make maybe one in the shed to have a new one for the next edition. But first, the more important is sail with the last generation of boats, and after to go train in the strong wind. So maybe to go in South Africa in Cape Town to
Cape
sail.
Race.
Yes, well, exactly. It's first you do 1 or 2 transatlantic, and after to go in the South Ocean is maybe the best training you can do for the Vendée Globe.
Good point. And the other thing is, what about the ice barrier system? We've seen it all the way through as a big influence on strategy and tactics. Is there anything can be done to change it?
To go back to what we know in 2004, not, because today the ice it's risky to sail in this area, but we're moving these limits when we don't see some ice. So, but today it's like that. We see the low pressure; it's always on the bottom of this these limits. So this Vendée Globe is not the same of the last one, and maybe it's not the same in 4 years. So the limit it's here, and we have to keep this limit.
Indeed, I'm talking to somebody who hit ice and who knows all about it.
Yes, I eat some one day some ice, so it's good to you can broke or you can sink, especially with the boat now is more light, so it's not
Yeah,
made
yeah.
to touch ice.
Listen, Seb, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll speak again before the end of the race, and have a nice Sunday.
Me too. Thank you. Have a nice Sunday.
So that's Sebastian Joss. Let's have a look at Charlie Dallin as he spoke to us not long after crossing Cape Horn this morning.
Well, it was nighttime here, but it's not completely dark here because we're very south, so I could just see in the dark the shadow of the island of Cape Horn and I could see the lights flashing as well. I just managed to see the shape of it in the dark. So that's a good thing. It was 6 nautical miles away from the rock from the cape when I rounded it. And I spoke to the lighthouse warden briefly in English. And the conditions were at 35 knots of wind. The sea state was still pretty big. That was a very emotional moment for me. I felt like it was it's a big achievement for me in this race. I'm glad I've taken this final cape. I was ahead for the first two. Good Hope and Lewin, but I was hoping to be ahead for this one as well. But the fate has decided differently for me. But second is still good, and we've got 7,000 miles to go to the top, so plenty of opportunity to catch Yannick.
And Charlie, do you think about all the sailors who have gone round Cape Horn for hundreds of years before?
Well, yeah, I'm happy I'm on this list now. It's the biggest. It's the king of all the capes, and now sailed past it. So I was pretty happy. Overnight when I sailed past, I just raised my arm in the air. Not many people have this chance to be sailing single-handed around Cape Horn, but now I've done it, it's a big achievement for me.
I saw you celebrating with a screw-top bottle of champagne and a chicken curry. I think maybe you've got a little bit of English in you.
Yeah.
Too much time in Southampton.
Probably. Well, I didn't know my the bottle of champagne. Yeah, I didn't know the bottle of champagne I had was screw top, so I discovered that when I opened it. And chicken curry, curry. I like chicken curry. I remember that the last New Year's Eve, the one from 2019 to 2020, I already had a curry. So I guess I like curry for New Year's Eve.
So that's Charlie Dallin. Conrad Humphreys then. Charlie Dallin celebrating with a chicken curry and a chicken tikka masala. He's practically English.
He certainly is. Yeah, I think Mike Golding would probably celebrate with the curry as well. He seems to.
Well, there you go. Anyway, Conrad, tell us a little bit about Captain Bligh then in April 1788. It was a very different time then when the sailors going round Cape Horn the other way.
Yeah, certainly was. Captain Bligh arrived in HMS Bounty in sort of late March, early March, in fact. And normally their route into the Pacific would be via the Cape, and they'd sail to Tahiti, and then from there go off about their business. His particular mission was to go and collect some breadfruit from Tahiti, and they got to Cape Horn and literally spent a month beating against headwinds to no avail. Eventually, they gave up, turned around, and sailed back to Cape of Good Hope, and then continued all the way around the world to Tahiti via all the Great Capes. So different time, different boats.
Different boats. I mean, what would they have to wear in those days? I mean, we have Gore-Tex, and our teams are all fully protected now. Generally at Cape Horn, they're mostly indoors a lot of the time. What was life like on board?
You can see this old picture here of a boat like HMS Bounty going around the Horn, and they're not really wearing very much in the way of protection. Certainly no life jackets on any of those sailors that I can see, hanging on for grim death probably. So yeah, they would have been wet, cold, pretty miserable, and just not really going very fast at all, which is why the clipper boats eventually realized that this wasn't the way forward.
And tell us a little bit about the mutiny then, because you obviously recreated the voyage in your own expedition.
Yeah, well, of course, as Bligh then continued on to Tonga eventually, well, to Tahiti and then on to Tonga, where there was a big argument on board the boat, and the younger Christian Fletcher took command and forced Bligh and 18 sailors into the small ship's launch, and left him for dead. And then he continued from there to navigate all the way to Timor, a voyage of about 45 days, kept all his men alive, and one of the most remarkable voyages, really historical voyages of survival that we've seen. And a few years ago, we got to recreate that voyage for a Channel 4 program. So really fascinating to sort of navigate traditionally and survive in a little open boat for 50 days and see what it was like.
What was it like?
It was, it had its mix of everything. I mean, actually, the sailing side was okay. I mean, you consider at times we were, in the middle of the Coral Sea, 1,400 miles from land. Quite precarious situations at times. Obviously, the crew that I was with were cast for Channel 4, so they weren't seasoned sailors. A real mix of experience, and that gave a fair amount of challenges. But it was great. I mean, I actually, to be at sea for that length of time in a little open boat was not dissimilar from being in the Vendée Globe in terms of just enduring that experience, but obviously the speeds were very different.
And what do you remember about your Vendée Globe at Cape Horn?
Well, funny enough, I remember quite a bit before Cape Horn, because as I was about 3 days before Cape Horn, I had probably the worst storm of the race for me. And in fact, you were chatting to Pip Hare the other day. I got knocked down in that storm and lost my wand from the top of the rig. And eventually I managed to put a wand on the back of the boat, but it meant for the duration of the race, I was struggling with wind information to the pilots and so on. So when you chatted to Pip about that, I was sort of sympathising with her, because it's a long, long way to go without having any wind information coming into your pilot system.
Now listen, Conrad, we've got a little question from the internet for you specifically. And the question is, how different is this race to your race in 2004, or indeed the 2004-2005 edition in particular? Well,
there are some quite considerable differences. I mean, I think you spoke to Seb Joss earlier about the ice gates. We had sort of the ice gates, not an ice line, and so it meant we had a lot more freedom with sailing. And in fact, during that race, I saw 4 or 5 icebergs, which of course the fleet don't tend to see at all now. The Pacific Ocean, very similar this time round, but I think the Indian Ocean was dramatically different. We had a lot of depressions in the Indian Ocean, whereas this race has been punctuated with high pressure, big high pressure systems, and of course the low pressures have been below the ice line. So it's been very, very tactical, very, very interesting. And of course, right now we've got this incredible fleet of boats together going around Cape Horn, a mix of 2008, 2007 Phare and Finos with the new Verdiers. So it's been fascinating to watch.
Do you want to predict an outcome?
Well, it's complex in the South Atlantic. I think if the boats end up reaching and on the wind, then it's going to be hard to find a way past the two front boats. If it remains complicated, we saw just how effective Damien Seguin and Jean Le Cam and in fact Benjamin Dutroux, they're all sailing incredibly well. They're sailing their boats to the best performance. So I wouldn't rule them out at this stage. And the other thing is, there's still quite a lot of racetrack to go. Historically, boats will still pull out of the race at this stage.
I think that's one of the things we kind of forget. There's still plenty of chances for boats to break down in the South Atlantic, and indeed even we've seen close to home. So there's plenty more left, isn't there?
We have. I mean, if you think of the keel failures, both in the South and in the North Atlantic, and boats finishing, without their keels, sailing, in some cases 1,000 miles with in that situation. So, I wouldn't rule out any of those sort of top 8 or 9 boats at this stage. They certainly need to keep pushing hard because victory could be in sight.
So you're not making any bets for us then?
no bets. No, they're all off at for this race, which is great. It's the way it should be.
Indeed, Conrad. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy your Sunday in Plymouth. I hope the weather's a little bit better than it is here in Les Sables d'Olonne. Thank you, Conrad. So that's all the time we have for today for our Vendée Globe Live. Our guests tomorrow are Alain Gauthier, who is the project manager with Isabelle Josch, joining us once again, and Eric Blondeau, who is the psychologist, an eminent psychologist, who works with Yannick Besnavin. We've got lots of questions for him. If you have any for either of them, then do post them on our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter or on Instagram. Join us tomorrow.